They were born in captivity, but they were born in other zoos and breeding facilities. Once they were born in those areas, then we've adopted them here, and they're here, well, to teach the public about the importance of their cousins out in the wild.
So they like being scratched kind of the same place as dogs?
Certainly, they certainly do. They enjoy it very much. When Flora was a little younger and I'd spend more time with her, she would always like let me scratch her tummy. She likes belly rubs too. So our wolves here at Northern Lights, they are exercised regularly. Casey and Shelley, they are the owners and the creators of the facility. They take them on off-leash hikes. From what we know, we're pretty much the only facility that does exercise our wolves on off-leash hikes that we know of. So Casey and Shelley dedicate their home time and their work life is here. This is their family. These would be their children. Once we do have them here and they become a mature age, we have them sterilized. We don't want to create any more captive wolves. And our wolves will be with us till the end of their time. Alright, so the wolf is known as a keystone species and a bioindicator. Keystone species meaning, for instance, I'll give you an example. Say we have an archway. That archway is made out of stones. You remove the center stone of that archway, it will collapse. So that center stone is considered to be the keystone of that archway. It holds it up in place. So for instance, Yellowstone National Park, our first national park in North America. In the late 1800s, the game warden, he wanted to make an elk preserve. Well, how did he do it? He said, I'm going to remove the top predator of the food chain, which is the wolf. The last wolf was shot, killed, and removed out of Yellowstone National Park. So when the 1930s came about, the elk population started to rise, so he was really happy about this. But as the 1940s came about, he was noticing that there was a lot of sick and old and weak elk hanging around the rivers, the bank sides of the rivers and the streams. The elk population was still growing, and the coyote population started to rise as well. He was quite concerned. So he had actually asked two biologists to come into the park to perform a study because he was noticing the beaver wasn't even found within the park and wasn't building their dams anymore. And vegetation wasn't growing much at all either. So these two biologists came in the 1950s into Yellowstone. The first two questions are, well, what happened to the willow trees and what happened to the beavers? So they concluded that, well, the elk literally overbrowsed the willow trees, prevented the willow trees from growing. Well, no willow trees to grow meant beavers had nothing to cut down to build their dams. So that's why the beavers died within the park or they left the park. As goes for the rest of the species, well, those biologists said, hey, let's reintroduce the gray wolf. Let's see what happens if we bring back the wolf. So sure enough, they did just that. In 1995, 1996, 31 of Canada's gray wolves were introduced to Yellowstone National Park. These gray wolves, they looked around, they said, oh my gosh, let's go and have lunch. They literally took out the sick, the old, and the weak right away. They wolfed down 25% of their body weight, definitely not moving for a while. Meanwhile, the healthy, the strong elk that were left, they started running, they started moving because they didn't want to end up like their cousins back there. Having them running and moving, that allowed for the willow trees to grow up into the sky. Well, the beavers that did leave the park, they looked over to the park. And, well, they cut down some of those willow trees. And they built their dams. Having this, well, then they had their kits, their children. In turn, well, they were building their food caches in their lodges underneath the surface of the water. That rose the water table up. Oxygen started to develop, and then larvae started forming, and larvae turned into insects, and then fish started swimming upstream, and then they started spawning underneath the branches from the willow trees that were growing along the bank sides of all the rivers and the streams. Those willow trees provide many homes for different species, such as songbirds and smaller animals. And certainly, not only that, but the coyote population that did skyrocket, that was under control. The wolves took out a bunch of the coyotes and told them to quit being such a nuisance. They had enough food, water, cover, and space in their area. A wolf's kill can feed many other species. I named off a bunch, and some others are actually grizzly bears, black bears, lynxes, foxes, bobcats, and even your birds of prey. And we know there's a lot of birds of prey out there. This park was completely healthy and balanced within 8 to 10 years, just because that wolf was brought back to that area. It's pretty remarkable how important the wolf is in an ecosystem. No, there has not been one single documented case of a wild, healthy wolf that's unhabituated that has ever attacked a human being. The only attacks on humans that you hear of by wolves is because it's been habituated. It has been fed by humans. That's why we say, please don't ever feed wildlife. Well, for instance, here in British Columbia, sterilizing is occurring on the alpha pairs of our wolf packs in certain areas, such as the South Selkirk Range and the Queensall Highlands. They're sterilizing the alpha pairs of those wild wolf packs because they want to save the caribou population. But it's not wolves taking out caribou completely at all. It's actually us humans. We are removing caribou habitat. We're removing caribou home. Improper management practices with logging and forestry. No harvest zone should be implemented. A lot more should be out there, and certainly recreational activities should stop in caribou winter ranges. And as goes for the sterilizing of the alpha pairs, what's happening is that, well, these alphas are being sterilized from a vet, and there is no follow-up after it's happened. They're released into the wild. And it's not like just like our dogs or our cats when we take them into the vet. The vet is very concerned, wants a follow-up appointment after it's been done. Not with these animals. So having that happen, the oil industry has been removing the trees, which is actually, in some areas, is caribou habitat. They're removing the trees, the habitat of the home, and turning up that soil. In turn, well, they're sucking out the oil. Having this happen, and if it keeps moving the way it is, as quick as it's going, 95% of woodland caribou habitat will be destroyed for the oil industry. The caribou is a very important migratory species. Wolves are getting the blame for the low caribou population. Wolves have been aerial culled. 500 wolves have been shot and killed in the last 5 years. Over $1 million of Alberta taxpayers' money has been funded for that. And certainly they've been baited as well. So, meaning they've been poisoned by bait. And it's not only wolves that eat that bait, it's other animals too. So there's better management practices that just need to be implemented for coming to a balance living with wildlife and humans. Certainly use your voice. You can write letters to the governments, you can come together as an organization, you can even just join up with Canadian Wolf Coalition and other organizations and come together as one. Use your voice, write a letter, sign a petition, do your own research as well, because it's really hard to come up with the stats and what is actually happening on predators, wolves, and well, with humans. We don't learn all that on television. Television actually makes it look a lot nicer than it really is. And that's all you can really certainly do. Just use your voice. That's what we're here for, right?